Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be diving back into my favorite Western slash end of days slash sci-fi slash crazy thrill ride of a story that I'm not even sure what genre it really is, but honestly, I think that's the reason I love it so much. It's East of West, number 3. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in June of 2013, we see that issue number 3 sticks with the same artistic theme that we saw in the first 2 issues, and an artistic theme that continues throughout the entire series of the monochrome top image on top of the stark blank white bottom of the cover. I really appreciate the fact that they decided early on to just stick with this same theme throughout the entirety of the book. It keeps it with a very cohesive feel throughout all of the series. Now, there are, of course, alternate covers that don't have this, but the mainline covers stick with this through the whole series, and I think it's a really cool choice. It really made the book pop out on the shelf, for sure, when these were first being published. And, it's a risky choice to make, but I think it really worked in the end. Jonathan Hickman, writer. Nick Dragata, artist. Frank Martin, colors. Russ Wooten, letters. We see here on the first page, it of course is just the blank white with the upside down triangle symbol that of course looks like a Triforce symbol from The Legend of Zelda, but it is not. It is in fact a symbol of the Armistice buildings that we saw in issue number 2, and it simply says above it, "Who is this woman who conquered death?" And that's the woman we're going to be meeting in this issue. The story, of course, begins exactly where it left off in the last issue, in the garden in New Shanghai. New Shanghai being located where San Francisco would exist in our world. Of course, the city of San Francisco was never founded in the story of East of West. We see 3 women approaching the garden from outside of the garden, and we find out that the garden is actually somewhat of a prison for one of the daughters of Chairman Mao, whose name is Zhao Lian. I believe that's how you say it. The 3 women who approach are stopped by one of the guards who is holding Zhao Lian. We see, of course, her hands are bound. She's wearing a collar that has long rods on the end of it for guards to hold, almost similar to like what you'd see animal control using. The officer in charge of, keeping her bound tells the security minister to hold, and that she has to be checked out first before they speak, that her father ordered it. And we find out that, of course, the security minister is none other than Zhao Lian's sister, Hu. They run a scan on Zhao Lian, finding that she has higher than normal bone density, but that's because her bones have been regenerated in some places. And she also has some cybernetic implants, but she's given the all clear. And then Hu somewhat mockingly says that she's clean like a dog's mouth, and then states that they have to go and meet their father, who has summoned the 2 of them. Zhao Lian, who's been put down onto her knees by the guards, is a little perturbed and maybe even irritated by the fact that Who just came to deliver this message, as she states, "This is the first time you've spoken to me in 10 years. I'm surprised that you don't have more to say than that." And it's kind of foreshadowing some things that went down between the 2 of them in the past that have led to them not being too fond of one another currently. Now, of course, we learned in the previous issue that Hu is in fact one of the chosen, who is tasked with ensuring that the prophecy of the message comes to pass. She is also the representative amongst the chosen for House Mao and the People's Republic. However, that was not always the case, as we find out in this flashback. We see that Hu rides up to some sort of structure built into the side of a mountain on this hover jet bike, and takes off her helmet and yells in, "Come out, Xiaolin, I know you're there." Zhao, of course, responds by stating, "I wasn't hiding, and, you're also unannounced." These 2, are already at odds in this flashback that's happening 10 years before the previous pages, as we see Xiaolin walk out and basically say, I told all of you not to look for me. What are you doing here? But that's when Hu says, I've found my purpose and it's a great one. Have you ever heard of the message? And it's at this point Xiaolian looks around, notices that she's surrounded by three of the horsemen of the apocalypse. We see conquest, famine, and war, who, interestingly enough, when they were reborn, all of their genders swapped. This, of course, we see as in the current timeline, their childlike forms are all the opposite genders of what we see here in their adult forms. Conquest was female, famine was male, and war was female. However, interestingly enough, war is the only one who seems to have a problem with that. Conquest and famine act as though they couldn't really care less what their physical form looks like, whereas war, as we saw, was really angry about the fact that they came back in a male body. Xiaolian realizes that she's been betrayed and asks, "What have you done?" And Hu simply responds, "Something righteous, something very, very righteous." As we see the three horsemen closing in on Xiaolian, ready to strike, and she's not in the best position here as she has no way of really defending herself against all three of them. We're then treated to this full page action splash image of Zhao flipping through the air as she's being attacked by the three horsemen, not willing to just surrender, even though her victory is hopeless. She has no chance of defeating them. And then on the next page, it simply says, "She lasted longer than you will," which, what a great way to start a comic book, man. I freaking love the writing in this book so much. We then, of course, reach the section of the book with the 2-page splash image that just says East of West, and then gives the title, this book being called The House of Mao. And this, of course, will be our first formal introduction to the House of Mao, and, our first real look at, the inner workings and the culture built by the House of Mao in the People's Republic. On the next page, we get another little blurb where it simply says, "If you cannot trust your eyes as you look at the world, what good are they? I can give you something better." I love these blank pages with just a little bit of dialogue or just a saying on them. It really sets the tone and sets the writing apart a little bit in this book in terms of the way that they're telling this story. We're then brought back to the junction on the border of the Union and the Burning Plain, back to the Atlas, which is the bar that we saw in the first issue that was destroyed by Death, Wolf, and Crow. It's been rebuilt at this point, and the bartender greets his first customers of the day, stating, "Welcome to the newly refurbished Atlas," talking about how happy he is to see them, until he realizes exactly who it is that just walked in through the door and notices that these are probably the last people on Earth he wanted to walk into his bar at any point in time and on any single day. And the reason he's so upset, of course, is because the people entering his bar are none other than the three horsemen, Famine, Conquest, and War. Conquest walks straight up to the bar and asks for a drink. It's at this point that the bartender tries to play dumb and, kind of tell him, we don't have a lot to offer, just red and blue. And besides, I think you're a little too young. Conquest then gets a little bit more serious and says, "Oh, I'm ancient, older than the world. And, you know better, Hunter. Now, give me a drink." This is, of course, is kind of the first time we're getting a real look into the backstory of the bartender / the hunter. At this point, we see Famine start to conjure up some sort of magic, I guess is the best way to put it, and show that there is an imprint of Death's aura inside of this building. War states, "Wow, he leaves an impression," and then looks at the bartender stating, "He was here, wasn't he?" The bartender tries to, cover for them and say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." But at that point, War says, "I wasn't talking to you." As we see the bartender grab over his eye patch, trying to hold the eyeball inside of his socket, and to no avail, it suddenly spurts out of his head. Once again, we see, and I love that the fact that his eyeball is its own unique character, and he tries to keep it locked away inside of his head, but it's able to, sometimes escape and do things and tell things and say things that he doesn't want to be done or told. And I like the whole dynamic that he's at odds with the eyeball that he's trying to keep locked inside of his own skull. As the eyeball lands on the bar, it tells War that death was indeed here. As we see Famine picking up on the energy signals left behind by both Wolf and Crow, stating that death was accompanied by 2 witches of the nation. War then wonders if that's possibly how Death survived his battle with the 3 of them, in which he was able to defeat and kill all of them. Of course, they were reborn in these new child bodies, but says that it's not important and proceeds to ask the eyeball if it knows what Death was after or where Death is going. The eyeball then states that, Tracker keeps him covered and, he can't see or hear all the things that were going on. It's at this point that Tracker, aka the bartender, grabs the eyeball and clenches it tightly to keep it from getting away, as he looks at the 3 horsemen and realizes that he's still in quite the predicament. The 3 of them look at him menacingly, wanting more answers, and they begin threatening to cut off parts of his body if he doesn't tell them. And they're actually kind of hoping that he'll try and hold out, as they actually enjoy torturing people. He, of course, immediately gives up the ghost as he slams the eyeball back into his skull, stating that, Death came in and threatened to kill him. And so what he gave him was a list of all the names of the chosen. It's at this point that the 3 horsemen realize that there are 3 main objectives that Death is going to be trying to complete. One, of course, is to kill all of the chosen. The second is to get back what the 3 of them stole from him. And the third will be to find his wife. However, they don't know what order he'll be going in, and they're hoping that there's someone here who can help them figure that out. Of course, Tracker, wanting to save his own skin, decides that he's going to help them in any way he can, and states that they're in great luck because he has a way to help them find Death immediately and, basically stop him on his quest, as he pulls a switch on the bar and we see the floor in the middle of the Atlas start to open up. As the Tracker jumps up onto the bar and we see a large hologram globe appear out of the floor in front of the horseman, he explains that he's actually part of an entire network of trackers and that no client ever deals with more than 1 tracker at a time, so everyone's under the impression that there's very few of them, when it's actually the exact opposite. There's actually hundreds, if not thousands of them all around the globe who work together to find different people and targets, and that they're actually capable of finding just about anything and anyone at any time, and that he is in charge of storing all of their collected information and actually has the title of Pathfinder. War then asks him if he can use this to locate Death, and he points out that he's already located Death, as War looks over and sees that Death is in fact headed towards New Shanghai. We then are brought back to Death, riding on his mechanical steed, also accompanied by Wolf and Crow still, as the 2 of them are having a conversation amongst themselves as Death rides ahead in silence. Crow stating that she doesn't understand what his motivations are, and, starts to actually, or says that she actually wonders what it is that drives him, asking Wolf if he wonders himself. Wolf says he doesn't wonder at all, he knows. In fact, he knows that it's absolutely love that is the driving force for Death, as the 2 of them follow behind as he enters a tunnel. As they walk through the tunnel, Wolf tells Crow that love changes people, and when you find it, you're a different person by the end of the day than you were when you woke up, and that it makes the old new and makes the dead things live, and it makes you into something better. He then states that, love is the driving force that would make a wolf follow a crow, even though the wolf can't fly and the crow need never touch the ground. Kind of implying that, he's absolutely in love with her, even though he knows that she doesn't feel the same way, and that he'll continue to be by her side, regardless of the fact that he knows that there's no hope for the two of them to find that love, at least not with each other. As they exit the other side of the cave, we see them approach what would in our world be the Golden Gate Bridge, but we can see here that it has definitely a Chinese architectural flair to it, as this is where things are going to start to heat up in New Shanghai. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall of New Shanghai, we see the two sisters approaching their father, the Premier Mao, as he's called, as he is informed that his daughters have arrived. He turns around looking somewhat disgusted by the two of them, and then starts to rebuke the two of them a little bit, stating that, you two have always been at odds since you were children. And he finds all of this too common, and then instructs Hu to remove the chains on Zhao wrists. Hu asks her father if it's wise to remove the chains from Zhao wrists, stating that, because of her isolation around only the guards who are mute, she may have started to lose her mind, that this is totally something that happens when people are deprived of human contact. Mao then states, yes, I'm aware, which is why I go to see her almost daily. This, of course, infuriates Hu, as she was unaware that this was happening. And Mao tells her that, her sister would become a broken and sad thing if he was not to go and visit her, stating, isn't that right, little flower? And as Zhao Lian starts to agree, she does so in a manner that's taunting her sister and gives her a sidelong glance. This, however, doesn't sit well with her father, as he then grabs her by the throat and picks her up in the air over his head, stating, don't test me today, child. I'm not in the mood for chaos, and chaos is at our doorstep. We then see outside of the city a huge explosion happen in the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge, as he throws Zhao down on the ground and then instructs Hu to take off her bindings, and then tells the two of them that death is at their doorstep. As the two sisters are on the ground, Zhao Lian having her bindings taken off, their father continues to scold the two of them, stating that there's a natural order to things, an order that's been upended by Hu's allegiances and by Zhao Lian's heart, as we see a messenger quickly running up the stairs towards the family of Mao. Mao continues to state that, the whole reason that Zhao Lian is still alive is because he struck a deal with the Chosen, stating that no one would ever find her ever again, and that the world would presume her dead, and if anyone ever finds her, including death, that the deal that they struck will be null and void, and that's going to spell a lot of trouble for the House of Mao. We see Zhao kind of clap back, stating, we've all suffered then, haven't we? But Hu then turns around and states that Zhao doesn't really understand the gravity of what's happening, that the Chosen have decided that if anyone outside of the house finds her alive, that some seriously bad things are going to come down on the People's Republic and the House of Mao, and that things are going to get really bad for not only their father, but them as well. And it's at this point we find out that Death is in fact Zhao's husband, which was not really clearly revealed to be the case. It sort of was at the end of the last issue, but this is the first point where we see a lot of other characters really talking about it. As the messenger gets to Mao's feet, he starts to tell him that Death has reached the outer point of the city and has already decimated the preliminary forces, and the forward riders have fallen. He asks then if Mao has a message to be delivered. Mao tells him he does. He makes one more request for peace with Death and asks him to please be reasonable and to put aside these childish endeavors, but also states that he wants the rider to tell him that if he doesn't turn back and presses this fight, that the House of Mao was built on the blood of its enemies, and that they will not be the only ones to suffer casualties on this day. As we see the rider jump onto his hover bike and race towards the bridge to deliver the message. The rider then races out of the gates, down the streets of the city, out towards the bridge, and as he gets onto the bridge, he slows down, jumps off of his bike, and begins waving a white flag, just as one of his countrymen is coming out of the smoke, trying to tell him to run before collapsing on the ground dead. He then gets on his knees as he sees Wolf and Crow appear out of the smoke and, asks that they stop this and that there be a peace. However, Crow says there's probably no chance that that's going to happen. And it's at this point the rider starts to deliver the warning that Mal gave to him, stating that, the people that they fought up until this point were nothing compared to the War Masters inside the wall, and that they were all picked from birth to be trained and serve as nothing but weapons of war, and that they were bred to die. But it's at this point we see Death come out of the smoke himself, stating good, because that's exactly what they're going to do. And he's like, there's not going to be any quarter, and I hope you're ready for the fight of your life, because I'm coming at you with everything I have, and then tells the messenger to run back to his wall and deliver that message to his leader. On the final page of the story, we see Death sitting upon his mechanical steed, holding a pistol in his hand, and he states, "The Great Wall is coming down, and my judgment will follow shortly," as we see the messenger realizing that things are about to get really bad for the Imperial City in New Shanghai, as we reach the end of the story, and then of course it's followed by a blank white page with nothing but the armistice symbol. On the final page of the book, we get an interview with Greg Rucka. Rucka, of course, being the writer for the book Lazarus. Now, I cover Lazarus on this channel as well, and if you'd like to know more about Lazarus, you can check out my Lazarus playlist. The interview is not super in-depth. Obviously, they only had one page to work with in terms of, how much room they were going to be able to write responses and questions on. But the question I found, I guess the most interesting was, they asked him, who's your biggest influence in your work? And his reply is Douglas Adams, but you'd hardly be able to tell, which is absolutely true. When you read Rucka's work, at no point do you think, man, this guy must have been really influenced by Douglas Adams. I thought that was a really funny response on his part. And on the reverse inside cover, we get a advertisement for Matt Fraction of Satellite Sam. I have all of Satellite Sam, and I like Satellite Sam a lot. I don't know that I'll ever be able to cover it here on YouTube, simply because of the subject matter, and also I believe there's a fair bit of nudity that exists in that book, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a cool story, and I'd like to be able to cover it. Maybe one day, if I ever start up a Patreon or something, I can do that series, but with the way that YouTube restricts content on their platform, I don't know that I'd ever be able to do it here. Maybe I could, maybe things will change one day, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I won't be able to, which kind of sucks, because I'd like to. I really enjoy Satellite Sam, and I really wish that YouTube was a little bit more art friendly in terms of what they allow on their platform, but unfortunately that's just wishful thinking. And that was East of West number 3. I absolutely loved this issue the same way I love this entire series. There's so much mystery involved in terms of us not exactly knowing what all the relationships and backstories to all these characters really are, but we're given enough of a bone to realize that there is a deeper connection between all these characters, and there is a lot of backstory, and there is a lot of stuff going on that we're not being made aware of just yet, as we don't know, what all of the conflict is about. But I feel like they do that in a way in this story with the way that Hickman writes, where the mystery keeps you coming back for more. It keeps you intrigued. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. And, despite the fact that you feel a little lost at times, you still stick with it because you're like, all right, there's gonna be a payoff. They're gonna, reveal a little bit more of the story in this point, and I'm going to learn more about what's happening, and I want to learn more about what's happening. And that to me is really difficult to do, and one of the hallmarks of truly great writing. And I can't say enough about how much I enjoy the story of East of West. But then again, those are just my opinions. You might hate this story and think it's the worst thing you've ever read. But if that's the case, it's fine, because everybody's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.